Having spoken about the importance of the instrument and its sound, how does one take care of it, change the strings, clean the pegs and beads, and position the bridge properly? Here are some pointers. When I talk about taking care of a tambura, I have to mention a very special person, Dakshinamurti Anna. He is the one who's been taking care of all of my tamburas for many years now, and his work with the tambura is so precise and so beautiful that it is an experience to just watch him. A lot of what I know is from observing him and asking him questions over the years and learning from his experiences, and I'm eternally grateful to him for all the care that he shows to all the instruments that he handles. So, when a new string is being added to an instrument, or if an older string is being replaced, it is important to make sure that there are no twists in the string. Otherwise, it will just suddenly snap and it can be quite dangerous. Once stringing is complete, make sure that there are no sharp edges of the strings left jutting out either, or there can be some pretty painful injuries, and I am saying this from personal experience. Here are some things I've learned over time about taking care of the tambura. Always handle the instrument with great care and make sure that it is never placed on the ground, either vertically or horizontally. Place it over a mat if it is being laid down, or over a cushion if it is being left upright in a tambura stand. You will find that both of these tamburas have a cushion below them. The reason for that is that the stand is made out of solid metal, and whenever the tambura is placed without a cushion, the stand comes in direct contact with the main resonating chamber of the instrument. So any slip of the hand or excessive pressure while placing it down can cause considerable damage. As you can see here, the cushion protects the instrument and makes sure that there is no direct physical contact. Placing the instrument upright and standing is ideal. However, the Tanjavur and the Trivandrum tamburas do not stand by themselves like the Meerut tamburas. So always make sure that it is secured and not left alone or just leaning against a wall. I have seen many musicians hanging their instruments on a thread linked to the top peg of the instrument and then tied around a nail on the wall. But I would perpetually be afraid of the dangers of maybe a loose knot or a fragile peg, so that is not something that I would personally recommend. Make sure that the fluctuations of the temperature is minimal in the room where the instruments are kept. Always make sure they are constantly checked and maintained in tune. Once a tambura is tuned, it is important to allow it to settle down. Always make sure they are constantly checked and maintained in tune, and that you do not keep switching the pitch once it is settled. Tamburas are also creatures of habit, just like human beings. This instrument is tuned to C sharp and is maintained only at C sharp. If you sometimes need an instrument for C or D, make sure there are alternative instruments that are stringed, tuned and maintained at that particular pitch, and that this instrument is not meddled with. The position of the pegs must also not be meddled with or modified, and the string tension must just be enough to avoid the unnecessary pressure of wear and tear on the wood in the long run. The strings have to be cleaned once every few days, at least to avoid the collection of dust, especially when the strings are wound and have ridges in them where the dust can collect extremely easily. Keep a separate set of cloth for the tamburas, one that is soft to handle the delicate portion around the strings, between the strings, the bridge and the beads, and a thicker one to wipe the portions between the decorations and on the stem and the base of the tambura where dust is more prominent. The bridge must be constantly examined and refiled every few months. Especially if the usage is more, then there is a natural wear and tear that takes place where the string vibrates on the bridge. Given that there are so many things to keep in mind to make sure that the tambura is taken care of and in tune, maybe that is the reason why the electronic substitute has gained popularity over the years. But how does the electronic sound measure up against the tambura sound? Every note that is created by the musician is so naturally complemented by the sound of the tambura. And the harmonics are never harsh, or they never clash with the melody that the musician is performing. While the early electronic versions were quite unbalanced, had no overtones and were quite hard to sing along with, the newer electronic versions have made considerable strides in coming closer to the sound of the tambura. However, it is still nowhere near the same experience. The harmonics are artificially enhanced and leveled, and the magic of searching for the sound is sometimes lost. There is also no variation or modulation in sound, and it is not reactive to the feel and emotion of the music, and thus tends to become monotonous beyond a certain point. Though they may be good enough to use as a source reference or for additional support, I personally would not recommend singing just to the electronic version. I have often heard musicians, in fact, say that it is better to perform with just the electronic rather than performing to a poorly tuned or an improperly played tambura. I completely disagree with this statement, as it is the duty of the musician to make sure that the tambura is tuned and played with care. Doing away with the tambura is absolutely unthinkable, especially within the realm of Indian classical music. Of course, there are many uses for the sound of the electronic Shruti box or the harmonium even. When a student begins to learn, for him to completely grasp the frequency, the plain monophonic sound is extremely helpful. It is impossible to expect a new student who is just beginning to learn the art to be able to immediately tune and play or sing along with the tambura. In fact, even though the student may be practicing with an electronic Shruti box at home, it is better if the teacher uses an actual tambura when teaching the students in classes so that the introduction at a later date is not entirely new. Having said this, there are many questions that we constantly hear from students and even rasikas with respect to the tambura. Let us try and answer a few of them now. I personally do not feel that the playing speed has to be coordinated with the talam or the beat, but there is a sense of rhythm in playing the tambura, and if the artist is sensitive enough to naturally react to the music, then I think that is more than sufficient. For me, the optimum playing sound of the tambura depends on each particular instrument. The speed at which the harmonics of that particular instrument are clearly brought out and heard is the optimum speed of playing for that particular instrument. However, as a general rule, you can say that the faster you go or the more speed in which you strum the strings, the more tensed or agitated the sound is and more distorted the harmonics are. I personally believe that every tambura has an optimum pitch where the best sound of that instrument is brought out. For example, I had a student who once bring me an instrument that was tuned to F sharp, and she was singing at A. So when I went through the process of restringing that particular instrument, I found that the same resonance and sound which the instrument was able to offer at F sharp was much more clear and rounder than it was at A. So then I let the instrument sit and settle for over a course of a few months, but I found that the moment I switched the strings back to 4.5, it sounded like an entirely new, different instrument. So that is when I began to realize that there is also an optimum pitch for every instrument based on its construction where it sounds the best. Yes, there is a specific thickness that every string has to bring out a specific frequency. It is also called the gauge of the string. Here is a small chart that maybe describes what thickness or what gauge to use depending on the pitch. Yes, there are instruments which have more than 4 strings. There are 5 strings. There are 6-string tamburas. It is believed that Amir Khan Saab was the first one to introduce the 6-string tambura, and there is no record of such a tambura before him. There are instruments being made today, especially in Miraj, where they make the 5-string and the 6-string variety. Famous dancers and Carnatic musician Srimati T. Balasaraswati also had one of these 6-string tamburas, but it was still a Miraj tambura. I had never come across a South Indian tambura, either a Tanjavur or a Trivandrum or a Mysore, that has 6 strings on them. I've always seen that they have only the 4-string variety. Yes, specific strings have to be tied to specific pegs. For example, the first string that is played, the Panchama, is tied to the side peg that flows along the line of the string. The center 2 strings are tied to the center 2 pegs that face the instrument. Normally, I prefer if the sarani is on the top peg and the anusarani is on the lower peg, but I have found instruments that also interchange this position. And finally, the mantra is on the side peg, which is to the side along the line of the mantra string. Yes, of course, the size of the tambura matters because the size determines the resonating chamber that is available for the instrument to create sound. Which is why, depending on the pitch and depending on the construction of the instrument, the tambura sounds a certain way. Which is why every tambura is unique in sound and unique in terms of how we listen to it. Yes, the quality of the string absolutely matters. In fact, I have found that when I have restrung tamburas, Dakshinamurti Anna has also told me that there are some strings when you place them on the tambura do not offer the same resonance. The moment you remove them and place a new string at the same bridge position, at the same jiva position, at the same beat position, the resonance of the tambura comes out. So then, when that happens, you then know that it is a fault of the string or some manufacturing defect with it that caused the lack of resonance the first time, which was then rectified by placing a good quality string. I would personally not recommend switching the pitch of one particular tambura. However, in a travel tambura, for example, if suppose because of a lot of fatigue or a lot of concerts or travel, we might feel a little more comfortable if the shruti is maybe probably dropped a little bit, or if we feel on that day we can have the shruti slightly higher, then those minute changes are okay. But apart from that, I would not recommend tuning a D shruti tambura to C or C sharp. Absolutely. Many of the times, I have students who refer to this as the manual tambura, whom I correct immediately. It is, in my mind, wrong to refer to this as the manual tambura. This is the tambura where all the other substitutes, like using a tambura app with your speakers or maybe one of the electronic shruti boxes, are substitutes and cannot be called a tambura. And I hope we all begin to do that collectively. In my mind, even though the tambura has all of the harmonics and so many different swarasthanas that we begin to hear at different times based on different tuning or different instruments, it is important to realize that the basic note that is heard from the tambura, the most boldest note, is the Adhara Shadja. So, whenever we are singing with that as a reference point, all of the overtones and harmonics which are heard while playing only complements the notes that we are singing. Even if we are singing the Shuddha Rishabha or the Kaishiki Nishada, the harmonics are completely complementing. Yes, it does happen where when we tune the tambura in the green room, it may require fine tuning when it is brought onto the stage once again. This happens because of the role of the environment and the surrounding sound waves. The moment it comes onto the stage, the temperature changes, and then the moment the screen opens, then again there are lights from the other side of the screen, and then the air conditioning or the temperature from the hall that affects the stage. So, all of these play a role in retuning and fine tuning and adjusting the tambura. There are many things you can do if the peg keeps slipping. Farooq Bhai, for example, when he brought this particular tambura, used talcum powder around the edge to make sure that the pegs stayed in place. Dakshinamurti Anna, on the other hand, uses the resin that's used for the violin bow and powders them and places them around the surface of the peg to make sure that it is in place. However, I found that the violin resin is extremely strong, because of which he uses a very minimal amount. There are also people who use chalk and maybe add a layer of chalk around it to just thicken the surface a little bit. If, however, the barade is extremely tight, then you can use maybe sandpaper and sand it or just shape it slightly so that it fits into the position and takes the necessary spot. Tambura 101 has been a fantastic opportunity for me to find words and articulate concepts and methods that I pretty much go through the motions of every single day without giving it a second thought. This happens because of years of learning and assimilating. Through the video series, I have tried to cover and explain as much as I know, but learning about the tambura and immersing oneself in its sound is a never ending process. We have covered many aspects of the instrument with respect to how to tune it, play it, care for it, love it, and make it a part of you. I often wonder why we don't hear enough of the tambura in live performances, especially when it can create the right mood and make for great concert listening. In fact, I have seen that whenever it is played before the curtains go up, there is an automatic sense of calm and silence among the audience where they are more tuned to receive the music. Nowadays, it is heartening to see so many more musicians using the tambura. It is important from a young age to involve students in the process of tuning and playing and give them time to get accustomed to this wonderful instrument. It is also the responsibility of the guru to make sure that classes are taught with the tambura so that the habit of singing with the tambura is inculcated from a very young age. There are so many such creations out there which are either poorly maintained, ignored, or even thrown away because there is no more use for them. Hopefully, with time, we find these tamburas out there which are waiting to be nurtured, cared for, and help them find their way into welcoming homes. We also need to take care of our tambura artists and appreciate the work that they do. It is the duty of us musicians to train and polish the skill of those who may be interested so that we create a better ecosystem for the future. It is also up to us musicians to make sure that every time the artists' names are mentioned, whether it be in a poster or an announcement or at the concert, we also make sure that the names of the tambura artists are included and give them their right of place. Ultimately, being on a journey with the tambura is truly an emotion and a personal experience. And I am so happy to have been able to share some of my thoughts and learnings with you. Hope you enjoyed watching this video series, and if you have any questions or comments, please do write in to me and I will get back to you about them as soon as possible. Thank you for watching Tambura 101 and I hope you enjoyed the experience.